Benjamin Wallfisch, an Emmy and Grammy Award nominee, whose latest film is the Amazon feature 13 Lives from director Ron Howard. This is your first project with Ron Howard, but I know Ron has worked so many times with Hans Zimmer, who is a freaking collaborator and a mentor to you. So how did that help in your relationship and collaboration with Ron, I guess? And like, how did that all work out?
Well, it was one of those amazing moments when I got this phone call that maybe there's an opportunity to work with Ron Howard. I couldn't believe it, and Hans was incredibly generous in introducing us and recommending me to Ron for this project. And we went through a process which definitely Hans has always done, and I've learned from him, which is to create a lot of music away from picture before we even started. So even before Ron started shooting, I wrote a sort of 20-minute suite just based on the script. The story itself, we're dealing with this extraordinary story of true heroism and cultures coming together to achieve something that should have been impossible. And this incredible, such an inspiring story. And this Ron, from the very beginning, his whole attitude and the philosophy for the score was to try to not make it sound like Apollo 13 or just a kind of classic thriller score. He wanted it to really be quite subtle, but also we didn't want to just kind of, it couldn't be generic, I guess, it was one of the main things. And the only way I found in was to actually think about the place and the mountain itself, where the cave, the Tham Luang area, and the mountain is if from a distance, the silhouette it looks like a bit like a sleeping woman, and the locals is the Princess Nang Nong. It's her mountain, the sleeping princess, and at the time of the rescue, the locals had the story that the princess was angry and that the rain was her tears. And so the starting point was this idea of the princess's theme, like the theme of the cave having a voice, the cave having a character. Otherwise, it was just going to be a sort of a thriller score where we all know it's all the odds are against everything happening, and so there was then it all became about just getting music from the place and really getting to know the culture as well as I could. Unfortunately, it was during the height of COVID lockdown in Thailand, so all of my plans to sort of rock up in Bangkok with a little recorder and knock on people's doors and say, "Hey, do you have an instrument? Let's record something." And I really wanted to actually travel to the area itself and get to know the local songs, the local folk music, and in the end we had to do all that virtually. But I was incredibly lucky to meet Napun Tita, who's a musicologist in Thailand, and she introduced me to a lot of her colleagues in the northern region of Thailand and some of the local songs there. And there's a song which we used as the starting point for the main theme, which is from the area, the exact area where the events took place. So all of this was happening whilst Ron was shooting the movie, and sort of sending these ideas to him, having a back and forth. So by the time we came to work together on the cut, I moved my family and we all went to London for 4 months, and just to have this kind of workshop situation with Ron where we could really try things, and it really did take a lot of experimentation, because every time we tried to be like a film score, it kind of didn't work. It had to really be quite subtle, and actually the rhythm of silence and how we we're not using score was as much of a big decision as when we were using score, what we did.
Yeah, it's amazing. You mentioned earlier there about like the mixing of cultures and stuff, and obviously like you did all this research in the area and the region, and then how do you like kind of like think of like how do you mix the cultures then in the music, I guess, and like how much of it is like trial and error, or how you kind of working that out? Like how does it all come together?
Well, I was very lucky to work with some amazing Thai musicians at the very beginning, and the key thing was to have not written a note when I did those recording sessions, and just invite them to play and improvise. But most importantly, I just wanted to really learn about the folk music traditions from northern Thailand. And once you start looking into these musical cultures that are not Western, you're talking about thousands and thousands years of having a by this oral tradition, and also the fact that every region of Thailand has such a specific, very subtle, or sometimes not subtle difference in the traditions. So I just really wanted to get inside the folk music, and we captured a lot of rhythmic material, which I wanted then to warp into the more tension kind of score part of the score. But a lot of it was just, in the end, I had this sort of incredible, I was always spoiled for choice in terms of what into the core material, and it was about paring it down to 2 or 3 core elements. So one was this sordang, which is like it's a 2-string string instrument, incredibly basic. It's literally just literally 2 strings attached to a kind of hollow coconut shell, I think it is, or bamboo, made out of bamboo. But it has such a beautiful sort of human voice quality to it. It's very mournful, and that's the first thing you hear. And then there's a flute, ney, which we use quite a lot. But the vocal element was probably the most important, and this idea of human breath. And so I made a lot of recordings with Nat Bunti, the musicologist, also a singer, for this vocal side. But the other thing is the score. We didn't want it to be just about the Thai culture, because of course there's this incredible international effort, and these 2 British divers, and lots of cultures coming. There's people from most countries were involved. So I wanted to also feature musicians from other places. So we had a cello and piano solo from UK, incredible UK musicians, and also the Chamber Orchestra of London, alongside the Thai musicians, to sort of bring to life that international collaboration aspect.
Yeah, that's awesome. It sounds, I mean, just hearing you talking about it sounds like an incredibly complex and complicated job to undertake. I guess what's the biggest challenge then when you're doing this? Like all of it? I don't know. Like, what was there something that stood out? Because it's like really impressive hearing you talk about it.
Well, it was definitely, probably the biggest challenge was how to really not write a film score in many ways. How to just be subtle but still respectful of the true human experience that we see on the screen, and this heroism which we didn't need to amplify. We didn't need to write heroic music or the tension or the jeopardy, because it's all there. And so it was somehow about, like, there's a spiritual aspect to the Thai culture which I really wanted to try and encapsulate with using this song, which is the princess's theme, the Sleeping Princess, but also just having a subtractive approach, actually being very subtle, and actually not allowing the score to really become too thematic until we really are in the part of the movie where we see the boys being saved, and letting the rhythm of, I mean, for example, all of the tension rhythmic elements in the first half of the score come from samples of the oxygen counters being scraped, or I was trying to see what's on the screen and just create my own version of samples of those, and turning those into like a ticking time bomb feel. And also the human breath aspect, lots of samples of breathing. But I think the biggest challenge was probably at the end of the movie, where everyone's been saved, and there's this incredible scene where the divers and the Navy SEALs walk out of the cave and shake each other's hands, and everyone's cheering. Cue big orchestra, big theme, big emotion. That's what you would always do. And we tried that, and we actually tested 3 or 4 versions of a cue. Ron is amazing. He tests his movies almost every 2 or 3 weeks. We did a test screening. It was, and he personally goes up and asks questions of the audience. What did you feel? And they're not just like, did you like this? It was like very targeted. And he invited me to come up with him and ask questions. And I was saying, did you feel manipulated here? Did this feel like a schmaltzy ending? Half the audience didn't notice it. Some of them, yes. And then we tested it with other approaches, very kind of noble and sad. And then we tested one with almost no music. And then we went full Hollywood. And we ended up with something which almost none of those approaches worked. And I remember Ron calling me, said, listen, I'm going to come over, and we're just going to listen to I did about 9 versions of that scene. Let's go through all of them and see what works. And I remember thinking, oh my God, that phone call means I better write something fresh. So in that half hour between the phone call and him arriving, I just quickly mocked something up on piano and strings. And it's just something with no ego, with no film score composer mentality, and then that's actually what ends up in the movie, something very simple, and just that's the thing. The movie kind of rejected a lot of what you'd expect it would accept in terms of the music, not the filmmakers, but the film itself. Whenever you tried to write what you would normally do as a film composer. It just never worked. So it was just a lot of experimentation and being happy with failure and keeping trying. And then in the end, what we ended up with, I think, was quite subtle and underplayed. But it was an amazing sort of collaborative journey. Also with James Wilcox, the editor, it was like a huge amount of back and forth.
Yeah, it's amazing. Benjamin Wallfisch, the movie is 13 Lives. You can watch it on Amazon now, and it's a great film. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me. Cheers.